The hijab isn't about covering your body, it's about uncovering your soul.
Have you ever wondered why something as simple as a piece of cloth carries so much power, so much controversy, and yet so much peace? The hijab is not just fabric, it's faith woven into form, a symbol of strength that whispers to the world, my worth is not for display, it's sacred. The hijab is not merely an article of clothing, it is a profound declaration of purpose and belonging. It is the visible expression of a heart that has chosen submission over conformity, clarity over confusion, and faith over fleeting trends. When a woman wears her hijab, she is not hiding herself from the world, she is revealing her truest self to her creator. The world may see modesty as restriction, but in Islam, modesty is liberation. The hijab liberates a woman from the endless cycle of comparison, from being defined by societal expectations or media portrayals of beauty. It reminds her that her value is inherent, not constructed by others' opinions. It's a conscious act of rebellion against a culture that measures women by the way they look instead of who they are. The hijab whispers, I am more than my reflection. I am a soul before I am a body, and that is where its strength lies, in reminding every woman that her connection with Allah is her ultimate adornment, and her faith is her crown. To wear the hijab is to take part in a deeply spiritual act of worship. It is not simply about covering the head, it's about guarding the heart. The physical veil is only the beginning. The true hijab extends beyond fabric into one's attitude, speech, and behavior. It is a daily reminder that faith must be reflected in action. Every morning when a woman puts on her hijab, she is recommitting herself to Allah's command, to modesty, to humility, and to a higher purpose. She walks into a world that may question her, judge her, or misunderstand her, but her resilience becomes a form of dawah. Each step in hijab tells a silent story of courage, of choosing Allah even when the world tempts her otherwise. The hijab is not forced upon the heart, blossoms from within. It is a journey, not an overnight transformation. There are struggles, moments of doubt, times when the weight of judgment feels heavy, but in those moments, the hijab becomes a source of strength, a shield that reminds the soul why it chose this path in the first place, for the pleasure of Allah alone. There is something sacred about the way the hijab teaches patience. It teaches the art of restraint in a world that glorifies exposure, the beauty of humility in a culture obsessed with pride, and the joy of devotion in a society that fears submission. The hijab doesn't suppress individuality. It refines it. It doesn't erase beauty. It redefines it. True beauty in Islam is not measured by visibility, but by virtue. A woman who wears the hijab is not saying, I am better than others, but rather, I am striving to be better for my Lord. The journey of the hijab humbles the ego because it shifts attention from being seen by people to being seen by Allah. And in that shift, there is unimaginable peace. For when a believer lives to please her creator, no criticism can shake her, and no praise can elevate her beyond humility. That's the quiet power of the hijab. It anchors the soul in sincerity, reminding it that faith is not for display, but for devotion. In a world that constantly tells women to reveal more, the hijab teaches the strength of concealment. It's a declaration that not everything beautiful needs to be seen to be valued. It's an act of quiet resistance against objectification, a spiritual statement that says, my body is not for the world's consumption, it belongs to the one who created it. Yet, the hijab is not just for the eyes of others, it transforms the one who wears it. It changes how she views herself, how she moves through the world, and how she connects with Allah. It builds confidence grounded not in looks but in faith. It instills discipline, focus, and purpose. Every time she chooses hijab, despite the pressure to take it off, she reaffirms her loyalty to Allah, proving that faith is stronger than fashion and conviction deeper than comfort. That is the unseen beauty of the hijab. It beautifies the soul even when it hides the hair. So, to the one who wears the hijab, or is contemplating it, know that it's not about perfection, it's about intention. You are not defined by how flawlessly you wear it, by the sincerity of your heart behind it. There will be days when you struggle, when the world feels heavy with its stares and assumptions, but those moments are not signs of weakness, they are opportunities for growth. Each challenge strengthens your resolve, polishes your faith, and draws you closer to Allah. Remember, the hijab is not a burden, it's a blessing. It's not a symbol of oppression, it's a symbol of honor. It's not about covering your beauty, it's about protecting your dignity. The hijab is a reminder that you are seen by Allah even when you are unseen by the world. And in that awareness lies the greatest empowerment a woman can ever have, the empowerment of knowing that she lives dresses and exists for the sake of the one who made her. The hijab is far more than a piece of fabric draped over the head. It is a profound spiritual statement, a reflection of faith, identity, and surrender to the will of Allah. It represents a woman's inner world manifesting outwardly, an act of worship that connects her daily life with her Creator's command. When a woman chooses to wear the hijab, she is not choosing to hide her beauty. Rather, she is choosing to define beauty through the lens of purity, dignity, and devotion. It is a deliberate decision to prioritize inner worth over outward validation, to seek the pleasure of Allah above the acceptance of people. The hijab whispers to the heart that the eyes of creation are temporary, but the gaze of the Creator is eternal. Every time a woman wraps her hijab, she wraps herself in remembrance, strength, and purpose. She tells the world without words that her worth is not determined by appearance, but by the depth of her character and faith. Yet, the hijab is not an easy journey. It is one of faith and constant renewal. It is a path where the heart must fight the pull of the world, its opinions, trends, and expectations, and turn instead toward the serenity of divine approval. The hijab becomes a shield, not against freedom, but against the illusions of false liberation. It guards her from a culture that measures women by how much they reveal, and instead teaches that true power comes from knowing what to conceal. In a society that commodifies femininity, the hijab is a declaration that a woman's worth cannot be bought, displayed, or objectified. It is her quiet rebellion against a system that profits from insecurity, against a world that constantly tells her she must look a certain way to be valued. Through the hijab, she claims her independence from these shallow standards, and in doing so, she finds peace. Peace that comes not from blending in, but from standing firm in faith. The hijab also becomes a test of sincerity. It asks her, who are you trying to please? The people who see you today, or the Lord who will see you always? It transforms every step she takes into an act of ibadah, every glance into modesty, every challenge into a form of strength. It reminds her that faith is not about perfection, but about perseverance. There will be days of doubt when the weight of judgment feels heavy. When the whispers of "take it off, it's easier" sound convincing. But those moments are not signs of failure. They are opportunities to deepen her trust in Allah. The struggle of the hijab is part of the beauty of the hijab, for Allah never burdens a soul beyond what it can bear. Each struggle makes her faith stronger, each tear a form of purification, each act of courage a form of worship. The hijab doesn't limit her dreams, it elevates them, because it teaches her that her strength comes from Allah, not from how the world perceives her. It is a daily reminder that she walks under the gaze of the most merciful, not the judgmental eyes of people. Through the hijab, she learns humility, but also power, the power to say, I choose what defines me. It is not an act of weakness, but of conviction, not submission to society, but submission to Allah. And there lies its greatest beauty. It aligns her outer life with her inner faith, creating harmony between body and soul. In its folds lies a story of struggle, sacrifice, and spiritual awakening. It is her armor in a world of distractions, her light in a world of darkness, and her silent dawah to all who see her. For when the heart wears the hijab before the head, that is when it truly becomes a crown of honor. The hijab is not merely a garment, but a symbol of profound devotion, a sacred act that connects the seen and the unseen, the physical and the spiritual. When a woman adorns herself with the hijab, she is not simply covering her head, she is clothing her soul in obedience, humility, and grace. It is an external reflection of an internal state, a declaration that her identity and self-worth are anchored not in societal expectations, but in divine guidance. The hijab is a conversation between the heart and the Creator, a continuous reminder that faith is not just spoken, but lived through action. Every time a woman steps out into the world with her hijab, she carries with her an invisible strength, a calm defiance that says, my beauty is not for the world's consumption. It is a trust, protected by my love for Allah. The act of wearing it transforms daily life into worship. Walking becomes modesty, speaking becomes reflection, and existing becomes a form of dawah. It protects her not only from the gaze of others, but from the constant pull of a materialistic culture that measures women by what they reveal rather than who they are. The hijab liberates her from the chains of unrealistic standards of beauty, allowing her to exist beyond the superficial judgments of appearance. It is an armor crafted by faith, one that shields her from the storm of external pressures and gives her the courage to embrace her spiritual worth. The beauty of the hijab lies in its purpose. It is not to erase a woman's identity, but to illuminate it in a different light, a light that shines through modesty, self-control, and sincerity. When she chooses to wear it, she is not surrendering her individuality, She is reclaiming it from a world that seeks to define her by shallow measures. It becomes a statement of freedom, one that declares, I am not defined by the eyes that see me, but by the one who created me. And within that realization, there is profound peace, a peace that no compliment, trend, validation can offer. The journey of the hijab, however, is not without its challenges. It is a path that tests the heart, a commitment that must be renewed daily. There are moments of doubt where the whispers of the world grow loud and the weight of judgment feels heavy. Yet it is in those moments that faith deepens, for true sincerity is not measured in ease but in perseverance. The hijab teaches patience and resilience. It calls a woman to stand firm in her belief even when the world questions her choice. It reminds her that modesty is not weakness, but strength, not repression, but empowerment. The hijab invites her to detach from the fleeting opinions of people and attach her heart to the eternal pleasure of Allah. Through every stare, every question, every test, she learns that Allah sees her effort, her struggle, her silent battles, and that is enough. It transforms the way she views herself, not as an ornament to be admired, as a servant of the most merciful, adorned in the garments of faith. The hijab is not just about appearance, it is about alignment, aligning her body with her soul, her actions with her beliefs. It teaches her to value what cannot be seen, her intentions, her purity, her devotion. And in a world obsessed with the visible, that becomes an act of extraordinary courage. The hijab is a mirror of inner faith, a daily reminder that true beauty is timeless, that honor is not found in the gaze of others, but in the pleasure of Allah. Each morning when she chooses to wear it despite the trials, she is making a powerful statement of love and surrender. She is telling the world that her life is guided by purpose, not pressure, by faith, not fashion. The hijab, in its essence, becomes her strength, her sanctuary, and her silent voice that echoes louder than words ever could. A voice that says, I know who I am, and I know who I belong to. The hijab is far more than a piece of cloth that rests upon the head. It is a reflection of the soul, quiet act of defiance in a world that constantly demands exposure. When a woman decides to wear the hijab, she steps into a spiritual contract between herself and her creator, choosing to honor her faith above fleeting trends or societal opinions. It is not an easy choice, and that's what makes it so powerful. It requires courage, conviction, and clarity of purpose. The hijab is not about concealing beauty, but about channeling it inward, transforming the external into a sanctuary for the internal. It is an emblem of peace that whispers strength and serenity into the heart of the believer. It reminds a woman that her worth is not something to be displayed, but something to be lived through her character, her compassion, and her connection with Allah. Every time she ties her scarf, she is making a profound declaration that her life's purpose is not to please creation, but the Creator. She chooses to rise above the illusions of validation that the modern world glorifies. The hijab shields her from the constant scrutiny of appearance and instead redirects attention to the essence of who she truly is. It teaches her that true empowerment comes not from revealing herself, but from knowing herself, not from seeking attention, but from seeking divine acceptance. Through her modesty, she becomes an embodiment of dignity, a walking reminder that faith can be both graceful and firm, soft yet unshakable. Wearing the hijab is not always easy. It is an act that often comes with societal judgment, misunderstanding, and at times even isolation. Yet, within these challenges lies its beauty. It transforms every act of perseverance into worship, every struggle into spiritual growth. When the world around her questions her decisions, she learns the art of patience and resilience. The hijab becomes her silent teacher, guiding her to detach from the noise of the world and anchor her identity in something eternal. Each trial strengthens her faith, reminding her that modesty is not oppression but liberation, the freedom from being objectified, the freedom from living under the pressure of impossible standards. It shifts her focus from the temporary to the timeless, from self-image to self-awareness. She learns to see herself through the eyes of the one who created her, rather than through the distorted lenses of a superficial world. The hijab is not a symbol of limitation, it is a pathway to spiritual elevation. It reshapes her understanding of beauty, not as something to flaunt, but something to nurture within. It is not a denial of femininity, but its purification, an acknowledgement that her body is sacred and her soul divine in purpose. And in that sacred covering, she discovers that modesty is not about hiding. It is about revealing her true essence, a woman of faith, self-respect, and inner light. The hijab teaches a woman about balance, between the external and the internal, the material and the spiritual. It reminds her that every aspect of her being is a trust from Allah, meant to be honored and protected. Through it, she cultivates humility, learning that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it resides in silence, in patience, in quiet defiance against a world that equates freedom with exposure. The hijab becomes her armor in a battle of ideals, a shield that guards her peace and preserves her dignity. It is a statement that says she chooses to be defined by her mind, her morals, and her connection to her faith, not by the contours of her body or the opinions of strangers. The woman who wears hijab stands as a symbol of courage, a reminder that faith is not about conformity to the world, but about transforming it through the light of truth. Every day she steps out wearing it. She represents something greater than herself. She becomes a reflection of divine wisdom in a world that often forgets the sacred. The hijab, therefore, is not simply fabric. It is faith made visible. It is the language of modesty spoken without words, the expression of devotion worn upon the shoulders. It is not a burden but a blessing, not a restriction but a reminder that real beauty lies in submission to the one who designed it. And within that submission, she finds peace, honor, and an unshakable sense of purpose, a peace that no trend can imitate and no criticism can take away. The hijab is a divine symbol of modesty, strength, and faith that transcends the fabric that covers the head. It is a spiritual statement that reflects the heart's submission to Allah. When a woman chooses to wear the hijab, she is not merely adopting a cultural practice or following a trend. She is consciously responding to a call from her creator. It is a choice rooted in conviction, not compulsion. The hijab becomes her shield in a world that constantly evaluates worth based on appearance. It grants her a sense of freedom from the chains of societal expectations, liberating her from being viewed through the lens of superficial beauty. She begins to see herself as Allah sees her, valuable, dignified, and purposeful. The hijab transforms from a simple garment into a daily act of worship, reminding her that every breath, every step, and every action can be an offering to the divine. Each time she covers herself, she is affirming her identity, saying silently but powerfully, "My body, my choice, but my choice is for Allah." This level of spiritual consciousness brings peace that no material success can replace. It strengthens her inner world, shaping her character into one that values modesty, humility, and purity. Through this act, she declares that true empowerment lies in obedience to the one who designed both her soul and her destiny. However, the journey of wearing the hijab is not without trials. A woman who wears it often finds herself standing at the crossroads of faith and social pressure. She may face criticism, misunderstanding, or even discrimination, yet it is within these challenges that her strength blossoms. The hijab teaches her resilience, the ability to stand firm in her faith while the world around her shakes. It becomes a symbol of quiet defiance, an armor that guards not only her body but also her heart. Through it, she learns that modesty is not about hiding, but about revealing what is most sacred, her connection to Allah. The discomfort she may feel from stares or judgment becomes a form of purification, reminding her that the path to Jannah is never one of ease, but a sincerity and steadfastness. In each moment of trial, the hijab whispers to her soul, "You are walking a path of honor." It turns her vulnerability into strength and her fear into faith. She discovers that true beauty does not lie in how much of herself she reveals to the world, but in how much of herself she preserves for the sake of Allah. And in that realization, she is no longer defined by the standards of people, but by the standard of divine love and mercy. The hijab also teaches her about balance between the internal and the external, the seen and the unseen. It becomes a constant reminder that the outer modesty must reflect an inner one. Covering her hair is easy. Purifying her heart requires ongoing effort. She learns that the hijab is not just about fabric, but about embodying the values it represents: patience, compassion, integrity, and self-control. Her modesty extends beyond clothing into her speech, her actions, and her intentions. The hijab becomes a daily call to self-accountability, encouraging her to reflect upon who she is and who she wishes to be in the sight of Allah. This spiritual discipline refines her character and nurtures her sense of taqwa, awareness of Allah's presence in every moment. Through this awareness, she walks through life with humility and grace, knowing that her value does not fluctuate with the opinions of others. The hijab shapes her to live not for applause, but for acceptance in the eyes of her creator. It frees her from the exhausting pursuit of validation and places her heart at peace with her purpose. She begins to understand that modesty is not about restriction, but protection. Protection of her soul from being commodified and protection of her worth from being diminished. And in the end, the hijab stands as a radiant symbol of love between a servant and her Lord. It is not merely an outer covering, but an inner declaration of faith. It reminds her daily of her identity as a believer and her ultimate goal, to please Allah. In a world that confuses exposure with empowerment, the hijab restores the sacred balance between dignity and devotion. It silently challenges the notion that a woman's worth is tied to her looks, proclaiming instead that her real strength lies in her submission to the divine. It empowers her to walk through life with confidence born not from vanity but from faith. Her hijab is her sanctuary, her act of worship, her statement of freedom. It tells the world that her beauty is not for display, it is a private treasure guarded for the sake of Allah. And as she continues to wear it with conviction, she carries within her a serenity that no hardship can disturb, a light that no darkness can dim. Because in every thread of her hijab lies a story of faith, resilience, and divine love, a story that reminds the world that true beauty, true empowerment, and true peace are found only in submission to the one who created them all.